Across the vastness of the galaxy, alien races often spoke of a distant time, an era before the peace of the Galactic Federation. They shared stories, passed down through countless generations, of a species known as humanity. But these tales were not of a noble race or a peaceful people. No, the legends of humans were filled with fire and fury, with a relentless drive to conquer, to survive, and to thrive in the face of impossible odds. To many, these stories were no more than myth, an ancient tale told by the oldest beings who still remembered the first spark of life in the galaxy. Humanity, according to the stories, was said to be both feared and revered. Some said that humans once roamed their home world, Earth, in ships that could tear through the stars. Others whispered that their warriors were unmatched, their minds sharp, their resolve unwavering. They spoke of a time when humans fought against each other, but even in their bloody conflicts, there was a certain respect for their power. However, the ultimate end of the humans was said to have come long ago. An extinction event, an unknown disaster that wiped out their civilization, leaving nothing but ruins behind. For the other races, it was a story of warning. They spoke of humanity as if it were a lesson, a tale to remind others of the dangers of unchecked ambition. As the centuries passed and the galaxy advanced, the truth of humanity's demise became an unquestioned certainty. The records of the galaxy's great powers were littered with the names of extinct species, and the myth of humanity was just one more tale in the archives of forgotten history. In the High Council chambers of the Galactic Federation, where leaders from 100 different worlds gathered to ensure peace, humanity's existence was never considered a threat. Their extinction had been accepted as fact, and as new species rose to power, humanity was relegated to the status of a mere footnote in the grand story of the universe. Many laughed at the idea of the humans ever returning. After all, if they had ever existed, surely their time had passed. But in the darkest corners of the galaxy, some still believed. There were those who whispered that humanity had not disappeared entirely, that they were out there, somewhere, biding their time, waiting for the moment to strike. But these were only stories, old myths that no one paid attention to anymore. The galaxy had moved on, and so had its people. Yet there was something stirring out in the empty expanse, beyond the known star systems, where even the most advanced species dared not go. A faint signal had begun to pulse, an ancient coded message from the void. It was nothing like the usual communications between worlds. The frequency was odd, the message old, but it seemed undeniably human. To the Galactic Federation, it was a strange anomaly, an error in the cosmic flow. They brushed it off as nothing more than an echo from an ancient time, a signal from a long-dead race. But in the deepest reaches of space, far beyond the reach of galactic authorities, the signal continued, growing stronger. It was a message, a call to anyone who would listen. And as the years passed, the ancient myth of humanity began to stir once more, awakening an ancient force no one could have expected. The legends, it seemed, were not as far-fetched as they had once believed. Humanity had not been wiped out. The story was far from over. It began as a whisper, a faint, distorted pulse drifting through the dark corners of the galaxy, barely detectable by the most sensitive of alien sensors. To the untrained eye, it might have appeared to be nothing more than a random fluctuation in the cosmic radiation. But to those who understood the ancient patterns of communication, it was something far more significant. It was a signal. And to the shock of the Galactic Council, it was unmistakably human. At first, the officials dismissed it as an anomaly, nothing more than the remnants of an ancient transmission long past its prime. After all, humans had been lost to the universe for centuries. How could such a primitive species still be out there, let alone capable of sending out a signal that could be picked up across light years? But the signal persisted, growing stronger over time. Its frequency didn't match anything known to the Galactic Federation. It was too structured, too deliberate. Someone, or something, was out there, trying to communicate. The Council called upon their brightest minds to investigate. A team of experts, led by Commander Threx, was dispatched to track the signal source. Threx was an alien of high rank, respected for his intellect and military prowess. He was from a species that had dominated its region of the galaxy for millennia, and the notion of a long-extinct species surviving in some forgotten corner of space was, to him, a matter of curiosity and a potential threat. As the team navigated the vast emptiness of space, the signal became clearer, sharper. Its pattern was undeniably human. A sequence of words in an ancient Earth language, now obsolete in the galaxy. The team couldn't believe it. How could humans have survived for so long without being detected? The more they analyzed the signal, the more impossible it seemed that such a civilization could have gone unnoticed, let alone be capable of sending out such a detailed message. The signal, once a faint whisper, soon became an unmistakable call. It wasn't just a message. It was a beacon, a marker placed in the dark void of space. It was as if humanity had intentionally reached out, preparing for someone, or something, to find them. The message spoke of a lost world, of Earth, of human history, of a species that once ruled the stars, but was now scattered across the universe. "This cannot be," Threx muttered under his breath, staring at the data streaming across his terminal. The humans, they were supposed to be a myth. The council convened immediately. Representatives from every major race in the galaxy gathered in a massive, floating hall. The room buzzed with a mix of disbelief, fear, and curiosity. Some were ready to dismiss it as an elaborate hoax, a mere trick to sow chaos. But others, the more cautious ones, feared that something far more significant was at play. If humanity was truly alive, then it could mean the return of a species that had once wielded unimaginable power. They were no longer just a forgotten myth. They were a potential threat. Threx stood before the council, his face a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. "This signal, it's not just an echo. It's alive. And we need to find out who is sending it before it's too late." His voice carried the weight of 1,000 years of wisdom, but even he couldn't hide the unease that had settled in his gut. What if the humans hadn't just survived? What if they had been building, waiting for the right moment to strike? The council's response was swift. An elite fleet would be dispatched to the signal's origin. If humanity was truly alive, then they would need to be confronted. But in the back of every mind, there was the growing realization. The galaxy might not be ready for what awaited them. The humans were no longer a distant memory. They were returning, and their legend was about to become a reality. As the fleet readied for departure, the signal's call pulsed through space like a heartbeat, steady, insistent, and now unmistakable. Humanity had not just survived, it had waited. And soon, the galaxy would come face to face with the legacy of a species once thought lost forever. The Galactic Federation's elite fleet gathered at the edge of the known universe, poised to investigate the source of the mysterious signal. A convoy of sleek, hyper-advanced ships, each equipped with the latest technology, waited in formation, their engines humming with restrained power. The crew members aboard each vessel had spent days preparing for the mission, but even the most seasoned officers were unsettled. They had no idea what they would find when they reached the signal's origin. The signal had grown louder, more frequent, and it was undeniably human in its pattern. But what did it mean? Who was sending it? Commander Threx stood at the helm of the flagship, his sharp eyes scanning the star-filled expanse ahead. His thoughts were a whirlwind, part curiosity, part dread. He had spent his career investigating galactic mysteries, but this felt different. This wasn't some isolated anomaly. It was the return of a forgotten race, a race whose myth had haunted every corner of the galaxy for centuries. "Commander, the signal is coming from a sector beyond the known systems," reported Lieutenant Yara, a brilliant navigator from the Talic species, whose star charts were unparalleled. "We're entering the coordinates now." The tension in the bridge was palpable. Threx nodded, his mind racing. He had read the histories, the legends of humanity's rise and fall, their ships once unrivaled in strength, their warriors known for their brutality. And yet, no one had ever confirmed their existence. The idea that humans might still be alive, somewhere in the vastness of space, was both a mystery and a threat. As the fleet pushed deeper into the unknown sector, an eerie quiet settled in. The stars in this region were different, distant, cold, and dim. It was as if the very fabric of the universe had altered, leaving this place untouched by the light of neighboring galaxies. The fleet moved through the darkness, their ships cutting through space like knives through silk. Then it happened. Without warning, the signal intensified, and the fleet's sensors picked up something massive, a shadow in the void. At first, it was indistinguishable from the vast emptiness, but as the ships drew closer, the shake took form. It was a fleet of ships that, to the astonishment of the alien crew, did not resemble anything in the galaxy's current military inventory. These ships were not sleek or graceful, nor were they outfitted with the latest weapons. Instead, they appeared crude, rough-hewn, angular, and intimidating. Their hulls were battered, scarred from countless battles, yet their very presence radiated a sense of power. They were built for one purpose: survival. The fleet loomed before them, a testament to human resilience. There was no mistaking it now. These ships were the ones that had been sending the signal, human technology, ancient and enduring. The Federation fleet had never seen anything like it. How had such primitive designs survived the millennia? Were they remnants of a lost civilization, or had the humans managed to preserve their fleet all this time? By the stars, they're real, murmured Threx, almost in disbelief. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair as he studied the formation. The ships were not just survivors. They were a formidable force. Each one was armed to the teeth, and they moved in a disciplined formation, a clear sign of military strategy and organization. Contacting the lead vessel, ordered Threx, his voice steady but tense. A transmission crackled through the fleet's comms. It was faint at first, but soon the message became clear. A single, calm voice emerged from the static. "This is Captain Area Rhodes of the human fleet. We are here. Prepare yourselves." The words were simple, yet they carried weight. The aliens who had once laughed at the stories of humanity now understood the full scope of the threat they were facing. The humans were not just a myth. They were alive, and they were ready to stake their claim in the galaxy. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The human fleet was not just a relic of the past. It was a living, breathing force, poised to challenge everything the galaxy had built over centuries. Threx's heart raced. The calm, authoritative tone of Captain Rhodes only deepened the growing unease in the pit of his stomach. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to claim their place among the stars. The Federation fleet stood at the edge of this unknown frontier, facing the return of humanity. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was reminded of a truth long forgotten. Some legends are not just stories. They are warnings. "This is Captain Rhodes," she said, her voice calm yet filled with an undeniable strength. "We've given you a warning. We didn't come here to negotiate. Now you know we won't be stopped. You've had your chance to leave. The choice is now yours. Surrender or face the consequences." Threx's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. The words were chilling in their simplicity. The human fleet wasn't just here to fight. They were here to win. And they were prepared to do whatever it took to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. The message was clear. The first clash had been a warning. The humans weren't going to back down, and neither was Threx. The war for the galaxy's future had just begun. The tension in the air was thick as the Federation fleet regrouped, their ships battered and shaken by the relentless assault of the human fleet. For the first time in a long while, the galaxy's most powerful forces were on the defensive. The pristine, high-tech warships of the Federation had been designed for dominance, capable of tearing through entire fleets with ease. Yet, in the face of humanity's crude but terrifyingly effective tactics, they were struggling to hold their ground. Commander Threx stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the damage reports flooding his console. The Federation fleet had taken heavy casualties. Several ships were lost, and many others were barely holding together. He couldn't understand it. How could these primitive, outdated ships withstand the firepower of their most advanced weapons? The humans were supposed to be a legend, a story told to frighten younglings. And yet, here they were, standing against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. "Sir, we've received a message from Captain Rhodes again," the communications officer announced, her voice laced with hesitation. Threx stiffened. He knew what was coming. Despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Humanity wasn't simply fighting for survival. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. And it was clear they weren't going to stop until they had reclaimed what they believed was rightfully theirs. "On screen," Threx ordered, his voice calm but filled with underlying tension. The holographic image of Captain Aria Rhodes appeared once more, her face a striking picture of calm determination. Behind her, the dark expanse of space seemed almost like an extension of her steely presence. Her eyes locked with Threx's on the screen, and for a moment, it felt like an unspoken challenge had passed between them. "Commander Threx," Rhodes began, her voice clear and steady. "You've seen the power of our fleet. You've felt the force of our will. You believed us to be a myth, but we are very real. And we are not here to negotiate. We are here to reclaim our place among the stars." Her words were simple, yet each one carried the weight of centuries. Threx had assumed the humans would be eager to negotiate, perhaps seek some form of diplomatic settlement. But that wasn't their way. From the very beginning, it was clear. Humanity was not here to share the galaxy. They were here to take it back. "Captain Rhodes," Threx replied, his voice measured, "you have underestimated the resolve of the Federation. We will not be intimidated by your outdated ships or your primitive tactics. You may have caught us off guard, but we will fight back. The galaxy is not yours to reclaim." Rhodes didn't flinch. She met Threx's words with a calmness that was almost unnerving. "You misunderstand, Commander. This isn't about intimidation. This is about survival. We are the last of our kind. We have been waiting for this moment for centuries. We have no intention of leaving, and we will not be stopped." The screen cut off as the transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Threx stared at the empty display, his mind reeling. The humans had been biding their time, waiting for the moment when they could reclaim their legacy. And now that moment had arrived. The Federation had assumed humanity's defeat was a certainty, that their extinction was something written into the fabric of history. But the humans had survived, hidden in the shadows of the universe. And now, they were returning, not as victims, but as victors. Threx paced the length of the bridge, his thoughts swirling. The humans had shown themselves to be a force unlike any other. They weren't just skilled warriors. They were survivors, cunning and adaptable, in ways that even the Federation's greatest minds could not have anticipated. The human fleet's resilience wasn't just physical, it was mental, a resolve honed through centuries of adversity. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. The humans weren't merely fighting for territory. They were fighting for their very existence. And in that fight, they were relentless, using every weapon, every strategy, every ounce of their willpower to claim victory. It wasn't about technology alone. It was about the human spirit, the drive to survive against all odds. This was a species that had never known surrender. "Prepare for the next phase," Threx ordered, his voice tight with resolve. "We cannot underestimate them again. This time, we strike first." But even as he spoke, a seed of doubt began to grow within him. The humans had proven their strength in battle, and now they had proven their will to win. Could the Federation truly stop them, or had they miscalculated from the very beginning? In that moment, Threx realized that the galaxy was on the brink of a new era, And humanity, the once forgotten legend, was no longer just a myth. They were a force that could no longer be ignored. The Federation fleet regrouped, battered but determined. Threx knew that they could not afford another misstep. The humans, with their ferocious assault, had already shown that they were not to be underestimated. Their ships, though seemingly outdated, were proving to be more than capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Federation's most advanced vessels. The question now wasn't how to defeat them. It was whether they could. As the Federation's flagship moved into position, Threx paced the bridge, his thoughts focused on the next move. He had expected a quick victory, an overwhelming show of force that would send the humans retreating into the shadows from which they had emerged. But instead, the battle had revealed something far more dangerous, a species that had not only survived but adapted, using everything at their disposal with a relentless, almost primal efficiency. "Commander, we have detected another wave of human ships moving toward our position," Lieutenant Yara reported, her voice tense. Threx's eyes narrowed. The human fleet was like a storm, unpredictable, yet powerful. And now, they were pushing forward with even more intensity. He had to make a decision, and fast. "Send a message to the fleet," Threx said, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. "Prepare for full combat. We will break them with a concentrated strike, target their lead ships and disable their command structure. If we can cripple their leadership, the rest of their fleet will fall apart." The officers around him worked quickly, sending out the orders to the fleet. Within moments, the Federation ships had shifted into formation, preparing for a decisive blow. The human fleet, however, seemed unfazed by the oncoming threat. Their ships continued their steady advance, each one seemingly more determined than the last. "Commander, the humans are responding to our move," Yara reported. "They're altering their trajectory. They're heading directly toward our strongest ships." Threx's heart skipped a beat. The humans weren't backing down. They were charging straight into the heart of the Federation's power. The more he studied their movements, the more he realized that they were not only fighting for survival, they were fighting for a place to exist in this galaxy, to reclaim the legacy that had once been theirs. "Ready all weapons," Threx commanded. "No more hesitation. This ends now." The battle was about to reach its climax. As the Federation fleet and the human ships collided once again, the clash was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Missiles, laser blasts, and energy beams filled the void, lighting up the darkness of space. The Federation's advanced weapons fired in quick succession, striking the human ships with precision. But once again, the humans proved their resilience. Their ships, though older, were sturdy, and they absorbed the hits with a stubborn tenacity that shook the Federation's confidence. One of the human ships, a massive vessel with an exposed command tower, was struck by a barrage of energy blasts. For a moment, it seemed as though the ship might buckle under the assault. But then, it retaliated, launching a counterstrike that took down one of the Federation's cruisers in a single, well-placed shot. The explosion was deafening, a violent reminder of the power the humans wielded. "Report," Threx shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. "One of our flagship's forward cruisers has been disabled, Commander," came the reply from a nervous officer. "We've lost power to several systems. The humans are pushing us back." Threx clenched his fists. He had misjudged them. The humans had turned the tide with their raw power and unwavering will. Their ships may not have been technologically superior, but they had something that the Federation lacked: heart, and that made them far more dangerous than any fleet of warships ever could be. "We can't hold them off much longer," one of the officers said quietly. "They've adapted. They're too resilient." Threx turned to face the screen again, watching the human fleet press their attack. He could see the change in the battle, a shift that had begun to favor humanity. The Federation's edge in technology was fading with each passing moment. The humans had found their rhythm, exploiting every weakness, every crack in the Federation's defense. A chilling realization struck him. The humans were not only fighting for their own survival, they were fighting to prove something. They were fighting for their legacy, for the right to exist in a galaxy that had forgotten them. And in that fight, they had found strength far beyond what anyone had expected. Retreat isn't an option, Threx muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. We fight. We fight until we break them. But deep inside, Threx knew the truth. The Federation had underestimated humanity once, and in doing so, they had set in motion a conflict that could change the entire balance of power in the galaxy. The tide was turning, and it wasn't in the Federation's favor anymore. The Federation fleet was on the brink of collapse. Threx could feel it in every tense moment, every missed strike, and every damaged vessel that struggled to stay afloat. The humans, with their crude but effective ships, had thrown the balance of power into chaos. Despite their technological superiority, the Federation fleet was faltering under the relentless pressure of humanity's fury. Threx stood at the command center of his flagship, his fists clenched, watching the battle unfold on the view screen. Ships of the Federation that had once been symbols of technological mastery were now crippled or destroyed. The once proud fleet, known across the galaxy for its might, was being pushed back by a race that had been written off as a myth. Commander, the human fleet is advancing on our flagship, Lieutenant Yara reported, her voice laced with panic. They've disabled 3 of our rear ships. We've lost contact with our reinforcements. Threx took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had never faced an enemy like this. The humans fought with a primal intensity, refusing to give an inch. Their tactics were unorthodox, their resilience unmatched. Every plan he devised seemed to be countered by their sheer unpredictability. We need to take decisive action, Threx said, his voice growing colder with each word. If we don't, we will lose everything. The Federation fleet was far from the overwhelming force it once was. The human ships, though less advanced, had a sheer determination that couldn't be matched. And that, above all, made them a terrifying adversary. Threx turned to the battle map projected on the wall, his mind working furiously to find a solution. There was one option left, something risky, something that could tip the scales in their favor. It was a last resort, but it might just give the Federation the edge they needed. Activate the Dreadnought Protocol, Threx ordered, his voice steady despite the mounting pressure. Prepare the final weapon. The Dreadnought Protocol was a secret weapon, a piece of Federation technology so powerful it had never been used in battle before. It was a planet-destroying weapon, capable of obliterating entire fleets in one swift strike. The Federation had designed it in case of an extreme threat, but they had never intended to use it. Until now. This will not end with the humans taking the galaxy, Threx said, his tone resolute. We will show them the power of the Federation. Threx's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. Where is the human fleet? He demanded, his voice trained. The technician at the communications console worked quickly, inputting commands to track the signal's origin. After a tense few moments, the answer came through. The human fleet. They've regrouped, the officer reported, disbelief in their voice. There are still more ships. The command vessel is gone, but they've adapted. They've reorganized, and they're preparing for another assault. Threx's mind raced. The Dreadnought had been their trump card, their final move. It was supposed to be a weapon that could crush entire fleets, eradicate any resistance, and yet it had only made the humans more dangerous. It had proven one thing. These humans could endure. They would not break. Are they retreating? Yara asked, her voice a mix of hope and uncertainty. Threx shook his head. No, they're not retreating. They are adapting. They are evolving on the battlefield. We underestimated them. And now we must face the consequences of that mistake. The Federation fleet had achieved a temporary victory, but at what cost? They had used their most destructive weapon, and it had barely slowed the human advance. The price of victory was becoming clear. Humanity's will to fight had only grown stronger in the face of their losses. Commander, the human fleet is moving toward us, another officer reported. "They're coming in full force. They've regrouped faster than we anticipated." Threx stood at the command center, his mind torn between the responsibility of leading his fleet and the overwhelming realization that the Federation's tactics were no longer enough. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving. Their resilience was their greatest strength, and it had become a force that the Federation couldn't easily defeat. "Prepare the fleet for another engagement," Threx said, his voice grim. "We will not retreat. We fight to the end." But deep down, Threx knew the truth. The Federation might be able to win a battle here and there, but the humans had already won something far more important. They had proven that they were a force that couldn't be ignored. They were no longer the stuff of legends. They were the real threat. The human fleet moved forward, their ships now more focused and determined than ever. They had lost their flagship, but they had gained something much more valuable: a purpose. The Federation had unleashed their ultimate weapon, and yet the humans were still standing. Their legacy had been resurrected, and now it was clear. They would not stop until they reclaimed their place in the galaxy. As the Federation prepared for what might be the final clash, Threx couldn't help but feel a growing sense of respect for the humans. They were more than just a challenge. They were a force of nature, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence on the command bridge was broken only by the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep of the control systems. Threx stood rigid in front of the star map, his eyes locked on the human fleet as it loomed closer. The communication channels buzzed with frantic messages from the other commanders in the fleet, all questioning the sudden appearance of these ancient vessels. But Threx remained focused, his mind racing through strategies, calculating their next move. "We need to understand their capabilities before we engage," Threx muttered, his eyes narrowing at the fleet's formation. Despite their crude design, these ships exuded an air of discipline and power. He knew they weren't here for a peaceful reunion. Humanity had never been known for its diplomacy. Without warning, the human fleet shifted into motion. Their ships, though outdated by the standards of the galaxy's most advanced forces, seemed to move with a precision that defied their appearance. There was no hesitation, no wavering in their trajectory. They were on a direct course toward the Federation fleet. "Commander, they're closing in." Lieutenant Yora's voice was urgent. "We've tried hailing them, but they're not responding." Threx's pulse quickened. The humans weren't here to talk. They were here to fight. His hand hovered over the console, but he hesitated. He couldn't risk a full-scale assault without knowing what these ships could do. He needed to act carefully. "Raise the shields. Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Threx ordered, his voice firm. The Federation fleet braced for impact. The massive human ships closed the distance between them with alarming speed. Then the first salvo was fired. It wasn't the clean, precise strike of advanced alien weapons. Instead, the human fire was raw, unpredictable, and brutal. The missiles streaked through space, smashing into the outer hulls of the Federation ships with a thunderous roar. The impact shook the entire fleet, sending shockwaves through the command vessel. "Shields are down to 40%. One of the officers yelled, his voice strained. "They're not using traditional energy weapons. These projectiles, they're heavier than anything we've encountered." Threx's eyes widened. The humans weren't just using technology. They were using a form of warfare that seemed ancient, even primitive, but devastating in its effectiveness. The Federation ships weren't prepared for this type of attack. "Return fire. All weapons, full power," Threx barked. The Federation fleet retaliated with energy blasts and precision laser strikes, but the human ships weathered the barrage with surprising resilience. It became clear that the humans had reinforced their vessels in ways no one had expected. The Federation's high-tech weaponry barely made a dent in the human ships' hulls, which were thicker and more durable than anything the Federation had encountered before. Another round of missiles tore through the Federation lines, and Threx's ship rocked violently as one of the blasts struck close. The damage was severe. The Federation fleet's edge in technology was slowly eroding against the sheer ferocity of the human assault. "Damage report," Frex demanded, his voice taut with rising tension. "Main engines are still intact, but we've lost auxiliary power in several sectors," the officer replied. "The enemy is relentless. They're not letting up." The human fleet showed no signs of stopping. They were using their ships like weapons, turning their entire fleet into an unyielding battering ram. With each strike, they grew more confident, more aggressive. The Federation's ships, once thought invincible, were beginning to falter under the relentless assault. Frex's mind raced. What kind of species fought like this? It was as if the humans had forgotten the meaning of surrender. Their tactics weren't just brutal. They were efficient, precise in their savagery. Frex had underestimated them. He had underestimated the human spirit. He had thought that their primitive ships, with their old designs, would be easily dismantled. But instead, they were proving to be far more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. "Captain Rhodes of the human fleet is hailing us again," the communications officer called out. Frex didn't hesitate. He knew what was coming. He straightened himself, giving the signal to open the channel. The screen flickered to life, and there, standing in front of a starry backdrop, was Captain Aria Rhodes. Her face was calm, her expression unwavering, as though the chaos of the battle raging outside didn't even touch her. Yara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. "Are you sure about this, Commander? The Dreadnought is a weapon of mass destruction. If we fire it, it could turn the tide, but it could also destroy everything within 1,000 light years." Frex's eyes narrowed, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. But there was no time for hesitation. The Federation was on the verge of losing everything. The Dreadnought was their only chance. "Do it," Frex said firmly. The command was given, and the crew scrambled to activate the weapon. The Dreadnought was a colossal engine of destruction, capable of harnessing the energy of a star and unleashing it with terrifying precision. The weapon was designed for ultimate control, but it was also a gamble. There was no turning back once it was fired. On the view screen, the human fleet continued its relentless advance. The humans had no idea what was coming. They had pushed the Federation to the edge, but they were about to face something far beyond their wildest expectations. A deep hum filled the command center as the Dreadnought's power core began to charge. The energy was immense, and the air seemed to tremble with the weight of it. Frex watched the human fleet draw closer, their ships moving like predators closing in on their prey. His heart raced. "Dreadnought ready," the technician reported, her voice tight. "We have a clear shot at their command vessel." Frex's gaze locked onto the screen, where Captain Rhodes' ship was positioned at the front of the human fleet. She was confident, unwavering, but she had no idea what was coming. "Fire," Frex commanded. The Dreadnought's weapon unleashed its fury. A beam of blinding energy erupted from the flagship, cutting through the darkness of space like a blade. The sheer power of the strike was overwhelming, and for a moment, time seemed to slow as the beam surged forward. The entire fleet of Federation ships seemed to hold its breath as the weapon sped toward the human command ship. The human fleet reacted too late. Rhodes' ship, the lead vessel, was hit directly by the blast. The energy tore through the hull, splitting it apart in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave from the blast rippled through the human fleet, sending several ships careening into each other in the chaos. The bridge was silent for a moment, the crew unsure whether the human fleet had been destroyed or if they had somehow survived. "Did it work?" Yara asked, her voice almost a whisper. Frex's eyes were fixed on the view screen, his mind racing. He could see the remains of the human flagship drifting in space, but the battle wasn't over yet. The explosion had been devastating, but humanity had proven time and time again that they were not easily defeated. Frex knew this might have won them a moment's respite, but he also knew that the humans would never back down so easily. "Keep the fleet on high alert," Frex said, his voice tight. "This war is far from over." The silence after the dreadnought's devastating strike was almost deafening. The Federation fleet watched as the remnants of the human command ship drifted through the void, torn apart by the raw power of the weapon. For a moment, it seemed as though the battle was over. The humans had been dealt a fatal blow. But then, a signal crackled through the communication channels. It was faint at first, then clearer with each passing second. Threx's eyes widened as the message came through. "Commander Threx, this is Captain Aria Rhodes." Her voice was steady, despite the devastation. "I must admit, that was impressive, but it will take more than that to defeat us." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed the words. Rhodes wasn't dead. The humans had survived the full brunt of the dreadnought's attack, and now they were speaking directly to the Federation again. Threx's heart raced. The sheer audacity of the humans to still stand after such a catastrophic blow was both infuriating and awe-inspiring. How had they survived? What kind of species were they? "Impossible," one of the officers muttered. "How could they have survived that blast?"